I was just like, oh man, my friends talk to angels, they talk to spirit guides, they talk to dead loved ones, and I'm like the alien one. I don't want that. Like, there was so much resistance, Ian, when this first started coming into my paradigm. I was just like, no, our history is a lie. And when you start knowing yourself, you start to learn your history and you start to wake up to that and know the truth of our history because it's in our collective DNA experience. It's just really made me wonder over time. Like, I don't think any of us are human in origin.
What is up, and welcome to another episode of Alternate Timelines. Oh my goodness, today's episode is so good. I had the pleasure of interviewing Kristy Crabtree, who is an entrepreneur, a therapist, an author, and an extraterrestrial. This conversation goes to places that I did not expect it to go. She's just a wealth of knowledge and a super straightforward and really down-to-earth person. And that's precisely why I wanted to have her on and talk to her, specifically about her extraterrestrial experiences. And she goes into great detail. And she does not hide anything. And truth be told, I also share some things in this podcast that I've never shared. So it was a experience for both of us. And if you're just coming to this podcast now, this is the second part of a series that we did. She interviewed me for her podcast, Transcendence Talks. And in that episode, she is interviewing me. In that episode, we talk a lot about entities and plant medicine and the different things that can glom onto you. Definitely something that you want to listen to if you've done any sort of plant medicine work or are in the realm of personal development or growth. Kristy has such a unique perspective coming from the field of therapy and running a successful counseling business. So hearing her talk about her experiences with non-ordinary states of being, plant medicine, and ultimately extraterrestrials, which is a lot of what this conversation revolves around, was really eye-opening. And she blew my mind on multiple occasions. So that was an experience that was really just cool for me to have because I've had a lot of extraterrestrial experiences, and the way she framed some things was just really unique and things that I'd never thought of. So there is just so much to learn from her. I'm super grateful to Kristy for coming on. And without further ado, let's just get into it. Kristy, I'm so grateful that you're on the podcast and taking this time with me. I really want to know about extraterrestrials. But before we get there, I would like to know a little bit more about your history. And we've spoken before, and I think a lot of people are going to be coming to this from the episode that we just did. We're doing a bit of a role reversal here. So on Kristy's podcast, the Transcendence Talks, she interviewed me, and now I'm going to be doing the interviewing and answering questions. The extraterrestrial thing, we'll get to it. But how did you get to the extraterrestrial thing? I know you spent time as a therapist, and I'm sure that informs a lot of what you've done with your practice and with work. But I know you also recently wrote a book and are starting a series of retreats that are related to that. So yeah, please inform us a little bit more about how you got to be here and what brought about the sacred revolution.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you as somebody who's so like-minded and I think who understands it firsthand. So it feels like there's no judgment. Like, I feel like a kindred spirit in this space, which is awesome. So I never thought I would arrive at a place where I was talking about extraterrestrials. In fact, when that came into my line of consciousness, I was just like, oh man, my friends talk to angels, they talk to spirit guides, they talk to dead loved ones, and I'm like the alien one. I don't want that. Like, there was so much resistance, Ian, when this first started coming into my paradigm. I was just like, no, I'm not going to talk about that part of it. I'm going to talk about all the things, but I'm not going to talk about that part of it. And at some point in my healing, it became so clear to me that that was why I was having these experiences, was because I was appointed to talk about it, because it needed to happen. It's a conversation that you see in the psychology realm when people start talking about EPs, they become hospitalized. They lose their licenses. They become subject to all kinds of different things where they lose their credibility. So when it honestly, if I wanted to be believable, I would have just left it out. I'll tell you that much. If I wanted to be believable and I wanted to maintain credibility, I would have left it out. But my personality is such that I share from a place of integrity. And because of that, it would have left too many holes and the story wouldn't have made sense. And so it's in my book and my book hasn't come out. It'll be available on Amazon by the summer, by June. And which is a year to date when my star family introduced themselves to me, which is ironic, but that's the way it went. I had a lot of resistance to this book and a lot of resistance to these experiences. So
I love so much that you refer to the extraterrestrials that you've encountered as your star family. I do a prayer every morning, and my star family is in part of my prayer, and that's how I talk to them, my brothers and sisters from the stars. That's how I refer to them. So that's like you just hit a core real deep inside me with that. And
it
there's
wasn't
this
my words, it was
mm,
theirs. It's how they introduced themselves to me. They said, "We're your star family. We have a message for you. Would you like to receive it?" And I said, "Yes." So that's just how I've named them ever since.
well, I honor you for saying yes. And when things come out of left field into our lives like that, it can be challenging to say yes. I think it takes a lot of courage because the things that we're going to be talking about and some of our shared experiences, they, as you said, can lend to people not thinking of you as credible. There's such a cultural taboo around uh, any conversations around extraterrestrials or even past lives or expanded states of consciousness, things that some people like you and I have experienced regularly and have a deep connection with and a level of understanding with that a lot of people just don't. And like I acknowledge the bravery that it takes for you to be out about it and to share your experience. So I guess I'm really curious the introduction to the star family in that situation. I think you said plant medicine. And I know plant medicine and you're doing work in the therapy field. There's some gray areas, contradiction can cause some issues. So I know you mentioned a little bit that what you're doing now has progressed quite a bit, but how does one make that jump? Because I know there are going to be a lot of people who they may not necessarily be therapists, but they are professionals and people that are having these sorts of experiences. How does somebody get to the point where you feel like you can talk about it and walk us through that journey that you went through from where you were in the beginning to where you are now?
Absolutely. So I think you come into the therapy field for a lot of reasons, but I think most people come into the therapy field because they have a desire to understand themselves. And so there's some selfish motive underlying that, right? Like I was fascinated by the study of psychology. And as I learned about it in school, I was like applying it to my own sense of self and expanding my own awareness of who I am and why I am who I am. And it was interesting. And so as I became a counselor in the field back in 2008, I noticed that it had limitations. Talk therapy had limitations. And so it put me on this journey of wanting to figure out how can I be more effective because people are coming in and they have trauma and talk therapy is simply not enough. And people can talk about their trauma, they can reframe cognitive beliefs, but it just felt like it wasn't getting to the root of anything. And I was frustrated sitting across from people with a passion, with the desire to help. And at the same time, I was experiencing this emptiness in myself that I really couldn't understand. So it was this parallel process of wanting to be effective and helpful and serve, and also figuring out why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling. And I was a student of every therapy modality that I would learn. I would go out and seek a therapist and say, I'm going to try this for myself because I will not put my clients through
Mm.
anything that I will not subject myself to. So I learned EMDR, I learned hypnotherapy, I learned internal family system. And all those things helped me become more and more effective and helped me learn more about myself at the same time. So I felt like with this expanding sense of gnosis, I could bring my clients to new depths of themselves because I wasn't afraid to go there anymore, but there was still something missing. And it wasn't until I discovered psilocybin and other plant medicines that I realized there's something inside of me that I haven't explored. And it was like this feeling of terror. And I remember experiencing this terror for the first time in ceremony, thinking, what is that? And I knew it was buried under these protective parts of me, probably the parts of me that would work a lot, that built businesses that were very successful. And I started to realize, I think you're running from something, but I don't know what it is. And then there was shame. Like, how can you be this therapist that helps people connect the dots in their lives, but there's just dots that are somehow disconnected in your own? And it was a really uncomfortable place for me to be. And that discomfort created this propensity of like, I need to figure it out and I need to do it quickly because I can't be in this liminal space of like whatever this unknown thing. So I started using the plant medicine to get to the bottom of it. And I found out I had repressed memories. And they were again, something I had resistance to. I didn't want that to be my story. It was also something that, okay, what do I do with it? The person who abused me is still in my life. I didn't know that that was my truth. Is it my truth? Am I just making it all up? Maybe I'm just making it all up and maybe I'm just a horrible person. Until the day came when that person seemed to confess to some of these things and validated what I had experienced. And that was this moment that shifted everything for me. It was like I was no longer battling myself and there was this sense of internal freedom that I had never experienced before because there was a part of me that my body was serving to protect me from knowing because it was just too overwhelming for that to be processed at the time. And there just comes a time in everybody's life, and not everybody has repressed memories, but we all have overwhelming experiences that are difficult to process. And until we have safety in our external environment, we can't process those things. And so the time came when I had safety in my family of creation, safety within my own nervous system, stability in my life. And it was like the time was just right then. And it was in uncovering that trauma in a ceremony where then God came in and was like, and now you get to be you authentically because you've like turned over that last stone that you were so afraid to look under. And so really that's when my star family came into the picture.
No, that's really interesting, and thank you so much for your vulnerability and willingness to share such a deep and intimate story. And I think that's something that happens to a lot of people, where that last stone left to be unturned, that's taking up some mental space or some space in your spirit. And in order for the new thing to come in, like your soul's journey, like what you're really put here for, in order to make room for that, you got to clear out all the stuff that's taking up that space. And often those last lingering things, they can be pretty gnarly. And I think I think there's a lot of people who just never uncover that last stone, and they just live their life with that thing, with that burden that they don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but they don't have enough courage, or they're not in a safe enough space to do that kind of work or to allow themselves to do that. And I believe that the unconscious mind represses memories in order to keep you safe. This is an evolutionary safety mechanism. This repressed memories isn't necessarily a bad thing. When that memory was repressed for a reason, because for whatever reason, maybe your neurology or because of your safety, you wouldn't have been able to process all that information when that thing happened. So,
Exactly that.
yeah.
Honestly, I was so young when it happened that the medicine regressed me back to before they even showed me the memory in medicine. When I say they, I'm referring to like my spirit team, right? Before they even showed me the memory, what they showed me was they regressed me back to almost being like an infant or a toddler, where you don't have this running dialogue in your head anymore. And I just got this sense that I'm just loving awareness and I'm observing life with the awe and the wonder of a child. And I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. This is what it feels like to be a baby, an infant. And I am just loving awareness and I'm observing this space. And And there was magic everywhere. And then there was the assault on my nervous system. And then there was the visceral imprint of the trauma that I felt. And I would say, no, 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 that's not real. That's not real. That this isn't happening. And when I would do that, the pain would come and my body would say, oh, yeah, try to deny me now. Try to deny me now. And it would hurt so bad. And I would feel all the pain come rushing back. And then I'd say, oh my God, that is real. That did happen to me. And this relief would come to my body and I would wrestle with it. And as I wrestled with it, the pain would come and the pain would go. But what I knew to be true in that moment was that there were no thoughts. There was no conceptualization of what was happening to me because I had no words for what had just happened because I was too little. And it's almost like when words are divorced from the experience of your nervous system, it does not imprint as an explicit memory. It imprints as an implicit memory, which is like, try to tell me how to ride a bike, right? There's like no words. You just have to get on there and you remember how to do it. But I can tell you how to bake my grandmother's cookies from like A to B, right? That's explicit, but implicit is like this just visceral memory with no anchors. And that's exactly what it was.
Wow. I just had a couple of light bulb moments and I never considered it from the point of view of a child. And I've experienced that from time to time in past life regression and plant medicine ceremonies being in that blissful childlike state. But I never thought about how you just don't have any frame of reference for something like you experienced. And there's nothing about that that would indicate that that is a real experience because it's so far out of your normal experience of just loving awareness. That's so profound and powerful. And like the fact that anybody and everybody experiences that at some point and that those kind of experiences really shape people in a really meaningful and profound way for potentially the rest of their lives. I mean, that experience, that is going to be something that's present with you either as a wound or as something that's healed for your entire life.
Absolutely.
So knowing that everybody has that, something like that from on that level really just opens my heart. And I feel a lot of compassion for people out there that are hurting and they don't even know why, because there's just a young version of themselves that was wounded in such a way that they can't even put words to, because the version of themselves that was wounded didn't necessarily have the development of language yet. So how is the adult going to be able to put words to something that had no words at the time?
And how do
And
you even accept it as your
yeah,
reality? And so that's why
wow,
in therapy, I was so frustrated. It's like, I know there's something there and I just can't touch it. I can't touch it. But, state induced learning is a thing. And until I was literally regressed by the medicine to that state of loving awareness, I don't think I would have ever had the capacity to access it. And people would say, well, you're just not ready to know. You're just not ready to know. When you're ready to know, you're going to know. And I want to punch them in the throat because I was like, I'm trying everything to know. I know there's something inside of me. I don't know what it is. And I've prayed every day to know. Don't tell me I'm not ready to know. It was just inaccessible to the aspects of my mind that it had just been buried so deep.
wow.
Mhm.
That's and to think that we all have an aspect of ourselves that is like that. I think if everybody thought about that a little bit more and took that into consideration when they're interacting with people in their day-to-day life, that it would probably have a big impact on just on how people communicate with each other and connect with each other and the fact that there's this shared experience that everybody has on in some sort of a way on some sort of level of just confusion and not being able to put words to different experiences and how that might shape your whole life. It's pretty mind-boggling and something I've never considered. And coming into this conversation, there's not too often where I have an experience of getting my mind blown like this, but kudos, that's fantastic and very unexpected. I'm gonna have to chew on this for a while.
Yeah,
S-
no, thank you. I did too. I wrestled with this one for I'd say 5 years, right? Like
Wow.
grappling with like, I don't want this to be true. Maybe I'm making it up, which was
Mm.
also part of the trauma, right? Like you're just making that up. That's not true. I'm sure that was part of the narrative of the trauma. I don't remember, but I have a sneaky suspicion. So it's real interesting. And I find that even now, right? Like I think, like you said, I'll always have a scar, always be healing from it. I think I'll always wrestle a little bit with, can I believe my truth at the deepest level or do I reject it? And I think that's the continued healing, is like to meet myself deeper and deeper in that space of trusting me. And I think we all have that kind of like core wound that we always we need it deeper and deeper and deeper until we can stand in the center. But it feels like a spiral to me. That's what I've been shown, is like you have a broad awareness and it gets more and more narrow till you get to the center. And I think we're all just working towards that center.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that really changed my paradigm thinking about the spiral. Cause yeah, this comes up in when talking about healing, saying you come to the same point on the spiral. And people talk about the spiral of ascension. As you learn and you grow and you raise in your frequency, you revisit the same point and relearn the same lessons in a different way that gives you new meaning and more wisdom about those lessons. But in the same way that there's a circle of ascension, there's an equal and opposite circle and spiral that goes down into the core of ourself. I think when you go up, it's you're connecting with source, and when you're going down the spiral, kind of as you motion, it's connecting with the core of yourself, which in one way they're the same thing, but there's a different experience of going in each direction.
And
That's
I think you got to go
yeah.
down to go up. When I met the first encounter I had with Christ, he showed me two triangles, one that goes down and one that
Mm.
goes up. And I was working with somebody facilitating a medicine session, and he said, first you go down. And I saw the spiral that goes down through that triangle. And he said to know that the heights of the spiral that goes up, you have to go to the depths of the spiral that goes down. And I think those polarities, I mean, we live in this world of polarities, and that's the portal. That's the portal. It's gnosis, right? It's ultimately the deepest form of gnosis where we can experience the most exalted state within ourselves.
That rings very true to me, and something that I become aware of through some sort of spiritual teaching is that your capacity to love somebody else is only as great as your capacity to love yourself. And like I think that's just a different way of articulating what you're talking about. To reach the highest heights, you have to reach the lowest lows, and as far as your ability is to go down into it, is going to be your ability or your willingness to go up into it. So after having this experience, and you said it took years to integrate that into to be able to put it into context and to work with it and to feel some sort of resolution from that. What was that journey like, and like the integration process for something that's so like deep and intense?
It wasn't until very recently that it made sense to me, because what spirit showed me and kind of like the chapters in my book is spirit showed me there's like these four levels to healing. There's these four steps, if you will, that we do over and over and over again. And the first one is just know yourself. And when I say know yourself, it's almost like that Carl Jung space of until you make the unconscious conscious, it dictates your life and you call it fate. It's that. It's not like, oh, I know who I am. It's like, no, like I know my unconscious patterns and I take accountability for them and I'm aware of the impact that they have and how they either propel me forward or hold me back. Phase so the medicine did that for me. Like, whoo, here's the unconscious things. And then the second part of that is die, which is that experience of surrender, of surrendering to those patterns and saying, okay, I see them and I'm willing to do something different with them. I'm willing to surrender them and let them go and transmute them into something else, which is where we rebirth ourselves. And that's where I stayed for a long time, was kind of like, "Ooh, I'm new here. I need to be gentle with myself. I feel like a toddler. I thought I knew what life was. I thought I knew who I was, and I guess I didn't. I guess I was wrong, and I guess I'm figuring that out, and I'm learning all over again, and maybe my whole life's been a lie, and it was a dark place, and it was also a place where there was new potentials and possibilities of freedom, of resolution, but I just didn't know how to get there, and I didn't know what that looked like, and it was a lot of hard conversations, renegotiating boundaries, recognizing where I've given so much of myself away to keep the peace or for other people's protection or safety, and grieving. And the last phase is phase 4, which is know yourself as creator, which is where you reclaim all those things and you call all your power back to you, and you can wield it in a way that serves others. And so spirit showed me those 4 phases, and I stayed in that third one, that rebirth phase, for years and years and years before I was ready to call my power back. And I had to build relationships with these young parts of myself that I exiled and cast away unintentionally because she was too much and she had a lot of pain and I didn't want to face her and I didn't want to know her. Yeah, so I stayed in that base for a long time. 4 years.
Wow. So, what is it like going from that phase, the rebirth phase, to calling your power back? What does that entail and what does that look like in your life? I'm guessing the book has something to do with that.
Yeah, so on my birthday, after this whole phase 3 thing, and I had the conversation with that person of kind of like, "Hey, this is just my reality. I know this happened and whatever." There was like this release. There was this sense of internal freedom. And that that summer, it was almost like medicine cracked me open. And I used that summer to allow these medicine experiences to almost like put me back together and figure out how to rebuild myself. And so my husband and it was my birthday and we had gone on vacation. I was like, I want to do a ceremony on my birthday. So that's exactly what we did. And he hadn't seen or experienced what had happened to me, and the medicine, it's as if I channeled that real young part of myself, and it was as if I needed my husband to just hold that space for me and witness that little girl because only I had known her. I hadn't shown her to anybody else, and it was as if she needed to be seen, and he was in a space where he was on his healing journey, and he was able to hold her and me and witness us together and say, "I believe you, and I know." And I'm sorry. And he just held me in that space. And it was so powerful and so sacred. And I thought that that's what that night was going to be about, was just him holding me in that space and us reconciling these things that happened and him witnessing that for me. And as I thought the medicine was wearing off that night, we were stargazing on a roof because stargazing has always been my thing. And he set up this beautiful birthday celebration for me where we stargazed on the top of a balcony in Mexico. And as we're watching the stars, and I'm coming out of medicine, I'm feeling pretty much in my body at this point. I watched the stars start to shift and they were moving in real time. And this wasn't like seeing it through the eyes of medicine. Like I was in my body and really clear. And I look at him and I'm like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" He's like, "The stars moving and making triangles." I said, "Yeah." Well, he didn't have this experience, but I did. And the first set of stars turned into the Pyramid of Giza. And the second set jetted out into a hologram where it looked like the pyramids you would see in Central America, like an Aztec step pyramid. And the third shape that emerged for me in this hologram where almost like you see a black night sky, it was as if the sky would become just a little bit blacker and the stars would make an outline. And I saw like a Chinese conical hat, like you would see in the rice field. And all of a sudden I hear, "This is your intergalactic star family. We have a message for you. Would you like to receive it?" And I feel like lightning go through the top of my head. I'm talking faster than I usually talk, and there's energy shooting through my heart out my left hand. And I was like, I think I'm dying. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm dying. And I say this to my husband, and he's like terrified now. And he looks at me like I have three heads, and he's like, "Star family?" And I was like, It's just what I'm hearing." And they said to say that. And he was like, "I'm gonna go to bed." And I was like, just hang with me for like a second. And I tell him what I'm seeing. I'm like, "Are you seeing this?" He's like, "I'm seeing shit move in the sky. You're talking about star family." He's like, "I don't know. Like, this makes me so uncomfortable." And I'm like, I know, but hang with me." And he was like, "Okay." So all of a sudden, I'm channeling, but I don't know that at the time, like I'm hearing and I am just speaking as I'm hearing it. And they're telling me that underneath all of the pyramids are labyrinths. And they said, "Congratulations, you walked the labyrinth." And I see Anubis, and I didn't know who he was at the time. I just see, I tell my husband, I see they're showing me this jackal headed god, like from Egypt, those jackal headed ones. And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm seeing him. And he's the one who let me into the labyrinth." And he said, "Congratulations. We send warriors and healers and shamans into the labyrinth. And it's where you meet yourself. And some people don't make it out alive. Some people die, but you meet yourself in the darkness. And when you can meet yourself in the darkness, you ascend to the top of the pyramid. And that's where you stand and you hold the light for others so that they can come out of the darkness." And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so it was as if like my life had just been this initiation process into stepping into this energy or this archetype of the healer. And there was like, they showed me an elephant in the stars. And then at this point, a ship comes. I see an actual craft and it like lights the sky. And my husband sees the craft and everything. And there's a light coming down on these stars. And there were like elephants. I'm like, were there elephants in Egypt? Because they're showing me elephants. And there's this space under the pyramid where it's like negative space and you can teleport your energy. And they're showing me all these things. He's like, I'm done. Like, I am done. I'm going to bed. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And so that was my first experience with my star family. And it only accelerated that summer where I was having experiences like this regularly on medicine and not on this.
Hmm.
And then like a whole book had been downloaded essentially into my head. But that was the initiation. That was like, nice to meet you. Are you open to us? And it was like a full mind body yes. I'm not sure if I fully understood what they were at the time. All of it was revealed over the summer, and they would just give me more and more information.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I understand how, for people listening to this, that may seem like a lot and seem out there. I just want to say that I had a different but similar sort of experience that you had. And I'm not going to get into it here. I definitely want to learn more details about that. But I just want to affirm that I had a similar sort of experience. And my belief is that there are more and more people who are having these experiences, and we're being called forth to start to share these experiences in mediums like this and start to put it out there. People talk about extraterrestrials and the disclosure. And there seems to be this belief that one day on the mainstream media, there's just going to be a news story on every news channel. They're going to be like, oh, well, they're here and here's the evidence. The thing is that nobody trusts the mainstream news networks. They've shown themselves to be not trustworthy and corrupt. When this information comes out, my belief is that it's going to be, rather than a top-down dispersal of information, it's going to be a ground up from individuals from our community, people that you know, your neighbors. There's going to be a point where we hit critical mass where you won't need to go to the news to know that extraterrestrials exist. You just go to Kristy down the street or Ian on the other side of town and say, hey, what do you know about this? Or I'm having this experience. Can you give me any context to this? I've heard you're the person to talk to. Like, oh yeah, well, you're experiencing X, Y, and Z. So for anybody out who's out there who's listening to this, you probably know somebody like us who's just yet to come out and talk about it in all likelihood.
Absolutely.
So I want to honor your story and your courage for being forthright and being willing to share your story. When it comes to the communication that you have with your star family, how do you experience that communication? It's probably not from your cell phone. What is that communication like for you?
It's evolved. It started where I would just experience it in medicine, and I would see that I probably started channeling in medicine. And so each medicine ceremony I would have, I mean, I had done medicine ceremonies, and I had not had these experiences. And all of a sudden, it was like once I healed that core wound,
Mm,
it was one thing I want to say about our star families is they're respectful. They ask
mm,
permission. Like they're so heart centered and so aware of our fear. If you don't clear the fear from your system, it's probably really unlikely that you're going to have these kinds of experiences. And if you do, they're probably going to show up in something that looks very scary that you're just going to like run from. And they recognize that. So I just want to preface this too by saying that they're very respectful and they meet you where you're at in my experience of them. But as that final healing, it was almost like that was one of the little last layers that came through. It's as if Anubis allowed me into whatever this portal was. I think Anubis is largely misunderstood in
mm,
historical context. They say that he would weigh a person's heart against a feather and in death, somebody died and then let them into the labyrinth. And I think he did that in life while people were
mm.
alive. I don't think he waited until death. I think maybe as they were releasing parts of themselves or dying to themselves, that's when he would weigh their heart against the feather. I think the word death can mean a lot of things. And I think it's misconstrued in some of the text. But anyways, as we would go on and have more ceremonies, I remember the next ceremony that my husband and I did, he had some work to do on himself. And that was the intention for the night. And so we both partook, and I saw he needed to do a little piece of work. And so I was guiding him through that piece of work. Well, my vision went ultraviolet. It was like everything in my vision had this ultraviolet hue. And we were in an Airbnb, and all of a sudden I can hear somebody punching in the numbers on the door for the code to get in, right? Like the key is just these numbers. And I thought, oh, somebody's here to clean the place. Like, this is bad timing. I'll tell them to leave. So I'm like waiting at any moment for like the house cleaners to walk in. They don't. Nobody walks in. And the door never opens and the door never closes, but there's footsteps approaching where we are in the Airbnb. And my husband's freaking out. He's like, what the heck's going on? This is so scary. And I was like, boom, something just came. I don't want to say I allowed the channel to open at that point. And it just says, we're your intergalactic star family. We're here to help you heal. Are you ready to receive some healing? And my husband's just like looking at me like, are you safe? Are you okay at this point? And I just said, we'd like for you to receive some healing. And I'm talking like in this plural. And he knew in that moment there was a shift in his affect. And he said, you're not even talking like you. I said, no. And he's just like, this is real. And I was like, and I'm channeling so fast at this point. It's really interesting because when they come through in the form of a stream of a channel, it's literally like a stream of consciousness that you're just allowing yourself to tune into. So when I speak, there might be pauses or ums, or I'm searching for clarification of what to say through my brain. This is very different. This is me trying so hard to keep the pace of this stream of consciousness, which is very fast and very high vibrational. So my voice tends to be higher in pitch, much faster, and it's things that I wouldn't say. And they intuitively knew things about my husband's life that I didn't know, about traumas that he had that shaped his perception of reality. They were talking about circumstances like of maybe something happening to an animal of his when he was very young and how that impacted him. And then they started talking about how him and I are actually having a parallel lifetime on another planet right now. And that he has a fear of death that he doesn't share or doesn't talk about, but that when he dies, he's just going to wake up on this planet. And they showed us that we were sitting together on the planet at that moment with our feet in the water, gazing down at ourselves here on Earth. Like, silly human, like when you pass away, you're just going to wake up and you're going to be here on this planet. Like you've always been, because you're never disconnected from it. And it was very clear. So then they channeled this whole healing. And this is when I really got this gift of my arm lighting up and being able to use my arm to scan for energetic blocks in people's bodies and send them a transmission that they can receive. And if they choose to receive it, they don't have to. But if they choose to receive it, it seems to clear some of those blocks for them. But I'm not a healer, right? Like, it's very clear that the person has to receive it and choose, and they're their own healer. This is just a high frequency that my star family allows me to disseminate at times to assist with that if people are open. So that's when that kind of came in, and they told me so much information that I couldn't have known. They talked about a planet, Chiron, and that's where this group of star being was from. And they described the color of the planet, the atmosphere, the density. There was so much that it's hard to even remember. But I think the biggest takeaway that I got out of that experience was that God is infinitely creative. And there are just so many different densities and layers to reality. And there's so many different meat suits, right? Or whatever, like
I love that.
avatars that we
Yeah.
can take on. And so talk about humbling and realizing that there's so much that I don't know. And that if you're just open and curious, this information starts to come that just really expands what you think you know about awareness. And I probably have more questions than answers, but these experiences just kept happening all summer long. And they would be paralleling, like when I'd work with clients, even my clients, they don't know what I'm going through, right? But they'd come in and be like, you know what? I had the weirdest thing happen, Kristy. I was in bed at night after our session today, regular psychotherapy session. This is like, I don't talk about this stuff in my session. And they're like, all of a sudden, somebody started keying in the door key. And it was like nobody was there. I think there was like a ghost. Like maybe you got a weird visitation or something. And I'm thinking, oh, that's so interesting. And I'm like, what the heck? What's actually going on? But they would like almost affirm to me, yeah, that was real, because clients that I'm just having sessions with Our
A little,
belief,
like a
my
little
ex-
wink from the universe.
Mhm. Yeah, like see that? Yeah.
That's wow. That's wild and really interesting. There are two things that you mentioned that really caught my attention and struck a chord. The first was when you were talking about Anubis and death. And I like intuitively, it almost felt like you were talking about ego death. Like he doesn't necessarily weigh your heart against the feather when your body dies, but
Right.
when you're willing to go beyond the ego, like that's when that can happen. And an ego death is very much a death experience. It is fundamentally the same experience you have when you die. So that's really interesting. I'd never considered that. That somebody got their wires crossed when they were making that interpretation or when they were
Like a literal interpretation when
yeah,
it was
yeah.
never meant to be literal, because I really feel like Anubis has this key that lets you into the labyrinth, but the labyrinth is like when you're really ready to meet yourself at the core,
Mhm.
Anubis is like, "Cool, you wanna do that? Like, I'll unlock that door. Good luck." Like, gloves off.
Wow, yeah, that and the fact that you're very adamant that our star family, they have our best interests at heart and they're always looking out for our what is best for us. And I think they recognize that interfering or interjecting themselves when somebody's not necessarily ready or somebody doesn't accept their invitation, that could potentially be traumatizing. And the last thing that they want to do is cause harm or trauma or some sort of mental anguish by making themselves be known or appearing at a time where it wasn't appropriate or the person wasn't ready.
I'll be honest, yes, I was, however, shown later that I've had experiences with them my whole life, and they veiled those experiences only for me to find out much later, because had I known what was happening at the time, it would have been absolutely, utterly terrifying. But my husband and I have both been shown experiences from the time when we were tiny, tiny children of engaging with them. And it was totally wiped from our memories until we were ready to remember. And then they were like, don't freak out. Like, we've been here your whole life. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and then I could remember those experiences, but I thought they were dreams. I thought
Mm,
they were, what's it called? Like when you're sleep
mm.
paralysis. I thought it was like a ghostly encounter. No, it was not.
In any of those experiences that were from your childhood or from when you were really young that had been withheld from you, were there ever a time where you had been on a craft?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one thing I don't think I've really shared with anybody, because I think that's probably when, like, all the labels of, like, "She's crazy" start
Mm,
coming out. So it's scary for me, but yes, and multiple experiences. But the first one, my husband and I did a ceremony, and we're having a shared vision, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am." I a word came into my head. It was, oh my gosh, what was it? Something reticuli. It was like the name of
mm.
a,
Like
it
Zeta
was like
Reticuli?
Zeta Reticuli. I was like, why do I keep thinking Zeta Reticuli over and over and over? And we look up above us, and there's like a cloud that looks like a freaking little alien in a craft. And I'm like, Google
Mm,
Zeta Reticuli. And he's like, oh my God, it says that that's where abductions take place. It's like on Zeta Reticuli. And I was like, and there's an alien like right there in the cloud. There's like a cloud alien. He's like, this is weird. And I'm like, I know. And at this point, he's gotten much more comfortable and he doesn't think I'm crazy anymore, which is good. But I'm like, oh my gosh, we are on a craft and it looks like we're on some kind of table. And he goes, I see it too. And he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, I used to reach down and grab your hand. Like, I know you from there. And I go, how old were you? He goes, 8. I go, oh, well, no, because I was 4. And he was like, we're 4 years apart. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. What's crazy, Ian, is I had, when I was 4 years, when I was born with a heart defect. It was a left ventricular septal defect. It was so big that I needed open heart surgery and I was very sick as a child.
wow.
And they're graded usually, like they're mild to very severe, and the moderate to severe ones tend to require open heart surgery. It's
Mm,
very unlikely that they'll resolve, but the mild ones tend to resolve on their own. But mine was severe. It was under the category of severe, to the point where if I even bit the inside of my cheek and bled, it would stress my heart out so bad that I'd need to be medicated.
wow.
So I was very fragile as a child and very sick. And I was scheduled for open heart surgery, and I had a regular pediatric cardiologist. But when I was 4 years old, right before my open heart surgery, I had a spontaneous miraculous healing that was actually in a medical journal because my pediatric cardiologist was like, I've never seen a severe heart defect like this just heal on its own spontaneously. And that was in California, Kaiser. And what really got me was seeing myself on that craft at 4 years old when my husband was 8 and he was holding my hand. I'm going to cry. And that's what they were doing. They were healing my heart. And what's crazy is before I ever saw any of this, I was in Bali, like years before I saw that my star family had anything to do with this healing. And I was sitting across from a soul seer at this like man's house on on his porch. And he's appointed, you're appointed in Bali, Indonesia, to become the seer because you start having these esoteric experiences. And he didn't speak any English, so I had to have my driver translate for me. And he goes like this. And the driver says, "Oh, you had a problem with your heart?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You weren't supposed to live. You were supposed to die." And I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, but you made a promise to God that you would heal people with your voice and that if you did that, he would let you live." And it was like in that moment, all these pieces just came together and like my purpose was so clear and my relationship with my star family was like solidified. And I realized that like we are them and they are us. And there's like no separation between anything in this whole universe. And there's nothing to fear. And so I take my work very seriously. It's a promise to God that I made. So yeah, I have not shared this. This is not even in my book because I feel like people
Yeah.
don't understand and it's very sacred to me. So yeah, I'm surprised I'm even talking about it right now.
There is nothing premeditated about this. And I did not expect to go here. But at 4 years old, I was taken on a craft and received a procedure, so to speak, that helped me. And it helped me survive and live in the situation that I was in. That's a whole other story for a different time, perhaps. But
No, I need to hear more about this now.
well,
Yeah, that one.
oh, and this came to me in a plant medicine ceremony. I had gotten a concussion. I had 7 or 8 concussions up to this point. I've had several traumatic brain injuries. And when I was 4, I fell off of the second story of a barn and gashed my forehead as I was falling. As I was falling through the floor, I hit my forehead and it tore off my eyebrow. And I always just thought that was the story because my parents semi make fun of me because of the time that I lost my eyebrow and I fell into a pile of cow shit off the barn. And, I thought that was it. Fast forward 30 years, I'm sitting in a ceremony and I'm working on healing the most recent concussion, this brain injury. And the little Dr. Citos and ayahuasca are pulling on little things and hooking up wires in my brain and making things come back together. And I had this download, this vision of, I realized that they were working behind my forehead and they were disconnecting capillaries, like these little veins behind my forehead. And then I was shown this vision of being 4 years old, being taken onto a craft. The extraterrestrials used that wound as a cover, basically. They made an incision under the wound so you wouldn't be able to see the incision. They placed a piece of human biological tissue. So basically something that would look like a patch for a tire, like some thick, dense brain matter above my third eye. And they attached some little veins to it and capillaries to it so that my body would feed it and keep it intact because it was there to block my ability to sense different kind of spiritual things. It basically reduced the capacity for my third eye to interpret and see beyond the veil because like the message that I got was it would have been too much for you. You wouldn't have been able to manage having a third eye that's wide open as a little kid in your situation. he would not have been able to cope with that much information coming in. So it's actually something that was done in order to help me. It was done for my well-being, and
Mhm.
knowing that at a point in my life, I would have an understanding and be able and have the tools and the support to be able to allow that the cutting of those up capillaries so that that gray matter could just dissipate on its own. My body could assimilate it, and that my third eye could have more access to what it was capable of being able to do.
Wow.
So you are not alone in this. And again, I have a strong sense that there are probably a lot of people who are like, that was a weird dream. I dreamt that I was on a steel table and there's a bunch of aliens around me. That's odd. There's-
Yeah.
Or yeah, and or maybe there was something more to it. And
And I didn't have
yeah,
dream. I had nothing, right? Like no memory of this whatsoever until I did. Just until I did. Where they're like, you're ready now, right? And it's almost like, again, gnosis. You have to go down that triangle before you can go up. And they're like, yeah, you really want to know yourself? Like, okay, ask and you shall receive. Like, we will show you who you are. And it's just really made me wonder over time. Like, I don't think any of us are human in origin. I think our ancestry is from other dimensions, from other realities, from other planets. And I don't know how much Greg Braden, like you watched. I remember going to this Greg Braden conference and he was talking about our DNA. And he was saying that the telomeres on the outside of the DNA are on the outside of the DNA. That's where they are. But in human DNA, 200,000 years ago, somewhere in the middle, there's fused DNA on chromosome 2 and 5 that allowed us to like speak words instead of have telepathy. And well, I'm making that assumption, right? He didn't say that, but I'm assuming that before we could speak words, we spoke telepathically because that's how these our star family speaks, right? And I feel like that's so much older than language and it's so much more efficient. And so, it changed things in our voice and in our throats, and the statistical probability of that being able to happen had not happened in any other species. No other species has developed in a way that they have fused telomeres where DNA strands literally fused. This makes you wonder, right? And it makes you wonder in like these biblical texts, they talk of giants, they talk of blue people in the Hindu worlds. And these are not things that look foreign when you're in medicine, right? I mean, my skin tends to be blue when I see myself on other planets and they call them gods, they call them myths. I don't think that anything's a myth. I really don't.
I love the Robert Edward Grant quote. What we perceive as coincidence is just a pattern that we've yet to recognize. It's a fancy way of saying there are no coincidences, and we're just not aware of the origins of the greater context to which we're experiencing our life. And we perceive things in a certain way, but that may not necessarily be the the ultimate truth of our experience. And in talking about your star family, what other messages have they shared with you that may be applicable to our society, to people as a whole? Have you gotten any idea as to when or if they'll be more accessible or interactive with people on a large scale basis?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. One way they've interacted with me is okay. This is where it gets really weird. This is what I'm still trying to unpack.
Yes.
There we go.
Give
So
it to me.
they come in with Christ all the time,
Hmm.
and it's almost as if he's somehow very intimately connected with the Star family. So much of the healing abilities that the Star families have, Christ has too, and they come in together in
Hmm.
my experiences, especially off of medicine, even more than
Hmm.
on. And what Christ told me is that when he comes back to the planet, it's not going to be through him coming back in the flesh. Christ said that it's going to be him coming back through the Christed DNA and the awakening of all of us. So as we remember, and what my star family told me is that this year, 2025, it's a 9 year in numerology. It's a year of any. And what they showed me is, and now it's very evident, but I was told this last year, like before the election and all of that, but that truth is going to be coming out. So it's going to be like we talked about those 4 phases of healing. Earth is in phase 2, die, right?
Hmm.
Which is like all the systems that we thought had our best interest at heart. we're seeing the heartbreaking reality that that's not true, that they never had our best interests at heart, that it boils down to corporate greed, keeping us sick and unwell and not knowing who we truly are and not knowing our power. And it's by design. And so as those systems die, that they'll be here and more present on our planet to be part of that rebirth of the next phase of our evolution. Because once we deconstruct, we have to now build something new and something more aligned with our consciousness. But that there seems to be two separate paths. I've seen very clearly these beings that have like chips integrated into their hearts. And it seems like AI, nothing's good or bad, right? Like
Mm.
AI technology, it's not good or bad. The consciousness behind it, just like medicine, the consciousness behind it is what dictates the experience of it. When I saw very clearly different timelines where some people choose to almost integrate with AI or technology to the detriment of their own soul, giving their power away to these tools and becoming completely inept or spiritually bankrupt. Where other people go on the path of going inside, evolving down a path of higher consciousness, and having a very different experience than those who choose to give their power away to these authorities and become essentially enslaved. And I've seen these beings, I've seen what they look like, and I've seen that timeline through my star family. I don't know if you've had similar experiences, but that's what I was.
I was in Colombia in 2017, out in the middle of the jungle, drinking ayahuasca with this indigenous family, middle of nowhere. And I stood under an almost full moon that night for I don't know how many hours. And I got a download that was almost exactly what you just described. Seeing two different realities, the people who merged with the AI and the people who continue to be people. And the message that I got was that people of our generation need to be strong, not only for ourselves, but for the next generation, because there's going to be a lot of hard questions that need to be answered. And we're going to have to decide what is human. And the people who are in the younger generations now, like they're going to have to deal with things that we never even thought of. So we need to get our stuff together right now so that we can be there to support and be wise elders to this generation that's going to have just with the proliferation of AI. And like you, I don't have a value judgment around AI. And I believe at a certain point of integration, basically that when your consciousness, when you get that chip that connects your brain to Google and there's no longer a barrier between your brain and your consciousness and what's available on the internet, when those things merge, that the thing that makes us human, our individuality, that goes away. And we become something closer to a beehive, or like our consciousness changes in a fundamental way. And not good or bad, but there are some serious consequences to that, and that means something. The effects of that, like I don't know
You
per
can't
se.
predict it.
Yeah, it's unpredictable, and that's exactly to the extent of to where that vision went for me. Is like
Yep.
when that happens, it's like that is going to be a new experience in all of the cosmos. That is going to be a novel experience, not only in this dimension, but across all dimensions in the universe. Like, there's a reason that there's, 8 billion people who have incarnated on the earth at this time, is because, like, this is where it's at. This is the best show in the galaxy, in the universe, and people want to be here to experience it. Not good or bad, but to just watch the whole thing unfold. I
Oh,
was like,
yes.
and the extraterrestrials, my sense is that they're doing the same thing too, and guiding us in a way that doesn't infringe on our free will. And my sense is that they're doing what they can within the boundaries of something that honors our free will and our ability to make the choice one way or another. And yeah, so I'm curious about like your thoughts on that.
They certainly conveyed a sense of urgency to me. I had all these experiences over a summer where all this information came and they were like, "You're gonna write a book." And I was like, "Okay." I literally run a group counseling practice. I have 50 employees. I am so busy. I don't have time to like stop and write a book. And I told my star family, I'm not going to write it for like 3 people. Like, I'm not going to write a book. Well, I've got to go find like what, a literary agent. I don't know how to do any of it. And they're like, but we gave you a book. And I said, okay, Star Family, if you want me to write a book, I'm putting it in your hands. And the synchronicities that followed were like within 10 days, my husband was like, hey, I was like scrolling through Instagram and there's like this lady who takes you to an island and like you just write a book in 5 days. He's like, I bet you could do it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's already there. I just need space. So I go to this island, I write the book. And then my publisher's like, oh, do you want to be on some TV shows as a result of your book? Like, my Star Family was like, it's not even out. And like, I've already filmed one TV show called Legacy Makers, and I'm filming another one in June. No joke. When you say yes, like when you're like, I'll accept the assignment, the universe is like, great. Like, let me just lay it all out for you. And that's what happens like when I don't know, there's like this singularity now of vision or purpose for me where it's like, okay, y'all healed my heart. And now you're like, you're going to give back. And it does feel like it's connected to the shift that's happening in our planet. And it does feel like individually and globally, these conversations are going to start to help people wake up to the reality of their power and who they are. And it's going to create that ripple that we talked about in my podcast, right? This ripple where as you heal, we don't even know how big that ripple is, but it's going to start activating something that everybody has forgotten. But our history is a lie. And when you start knowing yourself, you start to learn your history and you start to wake up to that and know the truth of our history because it's in our collective DNA experience. And when we know ourselves, we remember. And then I think we take our power back and we choose not to give it away. But it's going to be the people who are unhealed, who feel so powerless and like such a victim of this system that are going to opt for that as a solution.
The thing that's come to me recently is there's a real epidemic of suicide in our Western culture. And in suicide, people are just opting out. They're like, I don't want this experience anymore. I have a sense that merging with the AI is almost going to be a more acceptable version of that, just like opting out of the human experience. No judgment on either of those things, but it's fundamentally it's going to come down to like personal responsibility and am I capable of manifesting the life that I want? If I don't believe that, then I'm going to let the AI take over and I'll just join the swarm.
And part of the narrative is that our biology is fundamentally flawed. Your immune system is flawed. Take this medication.
Mm-hmm.
Your reproductive system is unsafe. It's unsafe to birth a baby. Like, let's just cut it out of you. Like, yes, there's a time and a place for all those things, but there's a larger narrative at play, which is as a human, you're fundamentally flawed and it's not safe to be human. And so I think we're going to be sold this paradigm of we can make it better and we can make it safer and we can make you more effective when that's the furthest thing from the truth.
And I think that there's going to be some very good marketing around that. And there's going to be some good arguments for integrating with the AI and technology to a certain extent. I think a really important conversation that we should all be having as soon as possible is going within, like what we've been talking about, and defining our boundaries, like immediately. What am I willing to give to AI? What part of my experience am I willing to relegate to AI to take responsibility for? And what's the red line that AI does not come into?
Absolutely.
I think everybody needs to know what that boundary is for themselves and have that conversation with yourself, go within yourself to seek the answer, because there's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of propaganda, a lot of marketing material being thrown at us, trying to sway us one way or another. And knowing what's right for you will give you the result and the experience that you're meant to have in a way where you're not going to be regretful for it or wish you had gone the other way. Like just knowing yourself and where your boundaries are and what kind of life you want for yourself, what's important for you.
And we have to look at history. Just within one generation, you and I are old enough that our childhoods weren't recorded. weren't like displayed all over Instagram. We didn't have the internet when we were growing up. Like I used to have a much longer ability to sit down with a book and read. My concentration used to be longer. I've noticed shifts within myself and my attention span as I've learned and become adapted to scrolling through Instagram and getting quick dopamine hits. And now I see my children. I have 2 sons, right, who have the attention span of a gnat because they grew up with phones in their hands and they grew up with technology as a means to help them with school and do the things that they didn't wanna do, right? Like, they were able to delegate those tasks out, and while it made school a little bit easier, like, it comes at a detriment, and people's brains are shifting as a result. Fertility is at an all-time low just because of the toxins in the food, and the medicine and in the water and in the sky, and so it's just we're already seeing fertility is low, testosterone is low, like, we're already seeing these unintended consequences of progress that we've made. And this is that next step. In biology, it's pretty basic. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it, right? The brain's going to prune away things that we get extrogenously that we don't need to worry about endogenously anymore because it's so effective. And so if we're not challenging ourselves, challenging our biology and overcoming obstacles to push our biology into continuing to improve, it's going to be pruned away. And we don't know what that's going to look like. So it's a scary thought, but I want to leave everybody with hope because we are so much more powerful. We are so much more eternal. We are so divine. And we're not what they say that we are. We're not weak. We're not helpless. This is just a temporary experience. And it's meant to be lived and cherished. And we need to know ourselves. And we need to know that we're literally creator in a body expressing itself through this avatar as you and I, and choosing to have an experience from this particular perspective. And when we take our power back, when we heal our trauma, because those things are so intimately connected, then we know the truth and we don't see life through the lens of our wounds and through fear.
If your star family could leave the people who are listening to this with one message, what do you think that would be? Beyond what you just said, which was really beautiful.
I just heard when you said that, keep an open heart and keep an open mind.
Hmm.
Right? Things are going to get worse before they're going to get better. We're walking into some really uncertain time and the truth is very inconvenient. And this is the time to cultivate faith. When things aren't consistent, when things feel really uncertain, that's the time to go within and to cultivate faith. So we have to have balance between these external chaotic realities and trying to keep our internal reality as calm and integrated as possible.
Mic drop. That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Much love and appreciation to your star family, part of the extended star family, I suppose, at this point. And yeah, to hear more about your story and to get more details, the book that's coming out June 1st is Sacred Revolution. And this, from what I understand, is going to dovetail into some retreats, which I can't wait to learn more about that. I believe that what you're doing is pivotal, and your message is really, it comes from a place of honesty and vulnerability. Like, this isn't necessarily easy to share. This isn't something that's going that you're doing to take advantage of a certain situation. And I'm here with you. I believe in you. I support you. And all the people out there who listen to this, who resonated with this, who feel like they don't have a voice or they can't speak up or they don't have context to some of the experiences that they're having. If what we talked about resonated, I know you and I are in a similar place here where we're going to continue to have these conversations and continue to shed light on different aspects and areas of the human condition and the expansion of consciousness. So all the links for Kristy's book and anything that she has available is going to be in the show notes below. I'll be looking forward to seeing you on the television. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And hearing more from your podcast and learning from the guests that you have on and seeing where this whole thing goes.
Oh, and thank you so much. Thank you for being like a safe space and platform to talk about this and to share this message. And thank you for your work and just being in this fight of truth and shifting this paradigm. It's so beautiful and I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. This, I have a feeling, is not going to be the last time we connect and do one of these conversations. So, yeah, everybody out there, check out Kristy's podcast, the Transcendence Talks, and keep an eye out for part 2 or possibly part 3 and 4 of this whenever those drop.